And now to our weekly roundtable. Joined tonight by Gelb. He's the president emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations and author of the new book, Power Rules. And by longtime foreign correspondent Charles Sennott, now executive editor of GlobalPost. Welcome to both of you. Good to see you both again.
Thank you.
We are approaching that magic barometer, often referred to as the first 100 days of a presidency, and from the point of the Obama administration, very aggressive when it comes to foreign policy. So Les, how has he done so far?
Rhetorically, he's done very well. He's done a lot of clearing of the air of anti-Americanism around the world. He's done a very good job of convincing leaders, and particularly publics around the world, that we have an understanding of their problems, of their culture, of their history, and that we'll take their interest into account. We're not going to try to boss them around. He's dissipating that bad image of the ugly American that was a terrible hangover from the Bush administration. As far as making tough decisions on the crises around the world, he hasn't had to face many of those decisions yet, and we haven't been able to judge his mettle on that, although there are plenty of people judging it already before he's had a chance to show what he's really intending.
There are a lot of people who are already second-guessing the president's foreign policy initiatives. Charles, how do you think he's done so far?
I think he's done well. I agree with Les. I think this is a president who hears the music of the world. I think he has a great ear for that music as someone who's lived in the world, who's really, especially the Muslim world, having spent some time as a child in Indonesia, the largest Muslim country in the world. I think there's something very visceral about this president, that he has an ability to hear what the world is saying in a way that certainly for the previous 8 years we did not have that, and I think he's done a good job of restoring some confidence. I think the tough part, though, is that the expectations are so high on this president that what he really faces as a challenge, and which sort of came up in the G20, is the need for him to begin to manage down the expectations of what he can really accomplish in the world. And I think that'll be one of the great challenges ahead for him.
Is he trying to do too much too soon?
See, I think he is. I think there's hardly a day that goes by that he isn't making some major decision internationally and on the economic questions. And I think that's too much. I think the key thing for anybody who's managing anything, let alone the President of the United States, is to make strategic choices, to set priorities. You can't do it all, no matter how smart you are. And the priority, I think, has to be fixing our economy and the global economy. It's not that you ignore the international crises, but you have to deal with them in a different way, and you can't do it all. And I don't know that he has absorbed that message yet.
Well, let's break down a few things real quickly. Russia, the reset button, that was the word that was used, has been pressed.
He has, well, I think it is good to begin to reassess the relationship with Russia, particularly in relationship to Georgia. But I think that this is a president who is confronting, Russia, Iran, North Korea, climate change. There is a lot to do. So I think this is an extraordinary moment in time with the economic crisis globally, with the threat of terrorism looming, with the strategic rethinking in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I think that we may not have had a moment in history where a president faced so many challenges so quickly that are so globally interconnected, that really the pressure upon him now is to move on many fronts at once. So I sort of would say, maybe we're not fair in saying he's doing too much when actually the agenda before him is so considerable.
But we talk about too much too soon, but we also know there's a time clock ticking. Iran's a great example of that. There is a finite amount of time until Iran comes up with a nuclear weapon, we believe.
Right.
So the overtures that have been made to Iran, and Iran is sort of weighing its response. Are they simply buying more time? Are we falling into that trap again? Or do you think the Obama administration really is going to forge something new?
I think he will do things with Iran. I think we will be engaged in negotiations with Iran. But the leadership there is a bunch of religious crazies. And they're going to make these negotiations very difficult because they've been preaching anti-Americanism for so long, they just can't walk away from it. They've got to convince themselves that they can manage the opening up of Iran to America and to the world. Once they do, we'll begin talking with them. And I believe that in 5 to 10 years, if we can continue this process carefully, slowly, without people screaming every 3 minutes that great breakthroughs haven't been achieved, that in 5 to 10 years, Iran will be a significant ally of the United States of America.
Mm-hmm. There's certainly many parts of the region where Iran could be a great help. Afghanistan is one of them.
And they
Iraq
did help
another.
us in Afghanistan at the start of the Afghan war. And they stopped only after Bush's axis of evil speech.
This week, of course, the president's focused on Latin America. Interesting developments regarding Cuba. And of course, Cuba is very close, not only geographically to the United States, but to a lot of Americans, Cuban Americans. How far do we go as far as making overtures to Cuba?
Well, I think it was interesting in terms of your point, Les, that he's trying to do too much at once. It was interesting that he announced the easing of the travel restrictions before the summit even happened. It was as if he wanted to pave the way to making that the focus of his talks when they are there for the summit in Trinidad. But I think that we can't go far enough with Cuba. I think he'll be restrained by the traditional sort of structures that have prevented any president from boldly setting out to try to really, reignite some form of dialogue with this neighbor of ours. I think that it's a moment in time to do that. There's bipartisan support. It was very interesting that Lugar came out early on in support of rethinking our relationship with Cuba. I think he has a lot of wind in his sails in this direction, and in the meeting over the next few days, this will be forefront, and I think there'll be a lot of momentum in the next few years.
Les, only a few seconds left. Do you think that Cuba is going to be a major breakthrough or just another project on the stove?
I think that what we've seen, that is opening up visits and allowing cash to flow back to Cuba, is about all he's going to do. I think it's all he should do, given all the other things on his plate.
Les Gelb, Charles Sennott, thank you both.
Thank
A
you.
pleasure.